Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining the League of Oregon Cities Legislative Update. As you may recall, this is the short session for the legislature, and things are moving incredibly quickly, and we're racing towards sine die. Before we go into the details of the legislative session, just a few housekeeping things to remind you all about. We don't have the chat feature, but we do have a Q&A feature. So as we're going, if you have questions, thoughts, please do use that. We might pause between lobbyists to share specific updates on questions. We might answer them at the end. And in addition, if there's time at the end, we'll go through live questions as we have them. I will note a number of folks need to leave and head back to the Capitol before 1, so we'll be moving quickly to make sure folks can get to committee meetings that begin there. But before we do that, just a reminder of where we are in the process. We're nearing the end of the legislative session, just 10 days left if you're looking at the calendar here. This legislative session, we've had a couple walkouts and an almost walkout. The legislature continues to convene and meet, and folks are convening on the floor to vote on bills now. We're also in that bitter end of session. So we're watching for surprises, navigating those as they come, and planning and preparing for the final budget numbers to be released. We're hearing over the weekend. So we're excited to understand what that looks like and where the state has to make reductions. Folks might remember the legislature was facing at the beginning of the session an $800 million deficit. That deficit has been marked away by a number of things. The revenue forecast was more positive than anticipated. And the legislature passed a package that added revenue, and I'll talk more about that later. But for the context, we have one more standard legislative update coming to you next Friday, and then your final legislative update for this legislative session is actually going to take place Friday the 13th, where we'll walk through what passed and what that means for you. And without further ado, I want to start with an assignment. As we talked about surprises on bills, this bill, Senate Bill 1585, was scheduled for a work session out of a policy committee. And instead of being voted out of the committee, it went to rule. So we have an assignment. We're asking cities to reach out to particularly House members, representatives, and ask that this bill be moved to the floor. If you have any questions, when Michael goes through his bills, he'll talk more in detail about this bill. It lowers grant matching requirements for smaller cities on a sliding scale. And as we've had a lot of member engagement and outreach on this bill, we know it's deeply important to the work you're doing. So this is our only key assignment for today. We'll walk through other ways to get engaged. Now to the first policy area, some key updates on transportation. There are two policy bills that have made it through the Ways and Means process. House Bill 4007 and Senate Bill 1544 are moving to their respective floors now after being passed out of the Budget Committee. In addition, as you may recall, ODOT has a budget hole of around $288 million to address this biennium and a little bit into next. They're working closely to shift that and make the agency whole, which might mean reduced programming, pausing on grants, or layoffs or position reductions. We should have that information over the weekend. And lastly, on the transportation space, certainly what has taken up the most airtime at the Capitol has been Senate Bill 1599. This is the bill that moves the date of the transportation tax referendum from the November ballot to the May ballot. The legislature was initially told a deadline of February 25th from the Secretary of State to move that bill. That deadline has come and gone. But the Secretary of State has warned of consequences of not moving the bill. There's been reporting from Oregon Public Broadcasting that I would encourage you all to review. I'm happy to put that in the chat when I'm done with my piece of the updates here. Certainly we're watching that closely, though LOC does not have a formal position. I'm going to do a quick pause to see if there's any transportation questions. I'm not seeing any, but want to give folks a moment. All right, I see a hand and I appreciate the hand. We will do live questions at the end, but if there's questions in writing, feel free to put those there. But if not, we'll get to you at the very end. I do see the hand. All right, to talk about the finance and revenue updates, want to highlight here Senate Bill 1507. I mentioned earlier, there's a bill that increases the revenue. This disconnects Oregon from some tax provisions that were part of HR 1 that includes interest deductions for auto loans and a few other things there. So that overall adds to the state's revenue for this biennium. And in addition, I will turn it over to Scott here to share some exciting news about the local act.
So we had some really good news this week on House Bill 4148. This bill, it's our TLT transient lodging tax bill. What the bill in its current form would do was allow if you have a transient lodging tax imposed after 2003, would allow 50% of those funds to be used for governmental services. The other 50% would have to be used for tourism promotion. The bill would also allow, in that tourism promotion portion, would also allow resiliency grants for tourism impacted businesses. The bill as introduced was a 60-40 split in favor of the local government, and the legislative process did its thing, and we are now at 50%. So it's not our original bill, but it's still progress. It still adds resources to local governments at a time where those have been stretched thin. And so it came out of the House floor on a 40-12 vote with 8 absences. So really strong showing on the House, bipartisan support for the bill. Goes now to the Senate. We're up in Senate revenue on Monday. It's scheduled, so that's always a good sign. We'll be there. We're going to testify. If you haven't talked to your legislators about this bill yet, we do ask that you talk to your senators and express your support for it. We're coming out with a lot of good momentum. It's always nice to come out of the House on a strong vote. And I think we got out by a single vote last session. So this is clearly some progress. And we're really talking about this bill in terms of tax fairness. It's the consumer tax. It's imposed by, it's paid by the consumer. It's collected by the hotelier. And so our ability to spend that money to address tourism impacts and provide services for our residents is really key. And so that's where we're at. Good news this week. We really like the direction we're headed in the Senate. We're just asking the bill come out clean, no amendments, so it doesn't have to go back over for a concurrence vote. And then it'll go from there to the governor's desk. So happy to take questions on this one. I do have to jet early. Part of our ethics package is up at 1 o'clock in Senate rules, and I think the members have been pretty clear they want that fixed. So happy to take questions on TLT.
Great. Well, Scott, there are a few questions coming through. I'll start first. This one's coming from Councilor Smith in Albany. Where is Senator Gelsler Bluen on the local act?
I think that would be a great conversation to have. We haven't counted her vote yet. Specifically, we're focusing on our committee hearing. I know this bill was caucused in the Senate, and it did get a green light. So I'm thinking she's favorably disposed, but if you want to have that conversation, I would encourage you to do so.
Right. And then we have another question here. Is there a sunset to the 50-50 split?
Yeah, there's no sunset. There is some reporting requirements that sunset, but not the split.
Okay. All right, I'm not seeing any further questions for Scott here. So we'll go ahead and move to the ethics package. And I know, Scott, you already gave a quick highlight about this. Anything else you'd like to add?
Yeah, so at 1 o'clock, 4161 and 4159 are in Senate rules, and 4161 fixes what we have come to colloquially call the hot dog opinion. This was one of our members wanted to serve hot dogs at a team building event. They went to go to the OGEC for pre-clearance and thinking it was pro forma. It turns out OGEC has had some views that were a little surprising to a lot of us. And so this bill would basically just says that food provided by the agency at meetings and events would be are not a benefit of office. And so that's what they had ruled, is that because it wasn't on the gift limit, it wasn't a gift ruling, it was a benefit of office ruling. They said that getting food provided at a meeting um, would be the use of your office, which it's a very bizarre ruling because it's the person who eats the food who has the violation, not the provider. And so if you're at a staff meeting and it's over lunch and the employer provides lunch to their employees, apparently that was a use of the office. Yeah, I mean, that's where they landed. We have a bill, we're fixing it. Um, it's already come off the House floor. It's in Senate rules. Same with 4159. This bill will make sure we have a local government representative on the OGEC. When we've had strong local government personalities on that OGEC, we just don't have as many of these kinds of conversations. And so there are some folks on there who have some relationships to local government. We would be hoping to have more of a consultative role on who those are moving forward. 4177, this bill came out of the Ways and Means Capital Construction Committee subcommittee, and so CapCon, they deal with capital construction issues, but it's also sort of a committee where the leadership of both chambers sit on that, and um, it's where the chambers can resolve issues with bills. It's sort of wouldn't call it a euphemism because it does deal with capital construction, but it's also the place where thorny issues can get resolved in a joint committee. So that bill came out of the capital construction we had one no vote. Senator McLean, Central and Eastern Oregon voted no on that one, but other than that, we came up pretty strong. I think there's been some really unfortunate coverage on this. I think I've had some media conversations and sort of explained what happened. I will say that I think the OGEC has completely misinterpreted this bill. I don't think that their testimony was particularly accurate in House rules. We're not going to allow this return of secret government. We're simply saying that deciding and deliberating is what is prohibited. You can talk to constituents, you can talk to the media, you can gather information. You cannot deliberate. We still draw that bright line on deliberation. There was a process. The media representatives elected not to participate in the last two of those meetings. They had expressed neutrality, and then lo and behold, right before session, they switched to oppose and needed the whole thing killed. And that's not what happened. So I think there's a lot more. I think there's a lot more drama on this bill to come, but we're going to stick with it. I think the bill's in good shape, and look forward to this coming out, seeing this on both chamber floors next week. Happy to take questions on this, but then I do need to go back to Senate rules to ensure that we can have food in meetings.
Thank you, Scott. I'm not seeing any questions for you. Thanks for fitting this in as you head back in between meetings in the Capitol.
All right, thank you.
Thanks. All right, and we'll be switching to Greg next to talk about general government bills.
Thank you, Qui. Let's see. A couple big ones on this list. We'll start with the easy one first. House Bill 4016 deals with contractor tax compliance in this state. The bill was written to focus on state contracts and exempt local governments or quote unquote political subdivisions of the state. But it failed to completely do that with the First Amendment try. The third section of the bill still contained provisions that would have put local governments and cities specifically on the hook for determining through a process if their contractors they were selecting were compliant with their taxes. We're successful with an amendment this week. Thank you to the city of Springfield for all of your work on that. Their attorney provided the language that was ultimately put into the amendment, and it was adopted and moved out of committee this morning. So good news on that. Senate Bill 1593 is the definition of political gamesmanship at the end of the session. I think for all intents and purposes, 1593A is dead. It is not moved out of the Senate Rules Committee since it was referred there from Senator Meek's committee earlier in the session. In addition to that, Senate Bill 1517A is the liability bill that was proposed by the trial lawyers. That bill has moved out of the Senate. Is currently sitting in a small group of legislators' laps on the House side who are desperately trying to get some compromise language figured out. There is an A8 amendment to Senate Bill 1517 out now. We have reviewed that, and that looks good from our perspective. We are still waiting for the small group in the House to finish their discussions. They will meet again today at 1 o'clock. We'll know more about the trajectory of 1517 after that meeting. There was a question in the chat about bullet points for the hearing. This afternoon's hearing was canceled so they can continue working on the bill. It's been rescheduled for Monday morning in the in committee. There are some heavy other bills during that committee hearing, though. So I would suggest, I'll send bullet points or draft testimony to this point, but signing up to testify, you may sit in a hearing room for 2 hours waiting for your turn. If you feel compelled to do it, absolutely. Just wanted to give you the forewarning on that. Written testimony will speak volumes. So after 1 o'clock, when we get the go-ahead, we can send you updated draft testimony that you can fit for your city's needs. House Bill 4089A will pass off of the floor today. It's scheduled for a third read. So looking good on that front. Questions on this slide? I don't see any. Next slide, if we can.
Oh, Greg, before you start with that, I just saw a question come through on 1517. Anything you'd like to add in terms of making good out of 1517, trying to build back in the 1593 language?
Yeah, no, you're correct. The ski areas are a little bit of an outlier in terms of focus. Absolutely important for Oregon's recreation industry, but the 1517 language are specifically wrapped around the Axelon. So we're trying to keep it more high level, not focus on one specific industry, but what's good for the overall recreation industry in the state of Oregon, and trying to get to an end that supports liability waivers that ease that insurance burden, and also create a better atmosphere for insurance providers to stay in the state. Anything else? Okay, next slide. Pretty simple week on these. House Bill 4076 exempts certain projects from state land use goals if they have an existing FSEC certificate for an existing project. And this would be to maximize the amount of energy can be reduced or can be generated to maximize transmission. The sense was in any given energy project, transmission is not maximized from that. So these projects are designed to supplement what that current generation is and maximize transmission. During the hearing, it was talked about specifically an FSEC process, but dialogue in the committee said, well, this sounds like it's a good idea for local governments too. So the committee reached out to our friends at AOC, who then also let us know that the amendment was coming. So our folks had a chance to work with AOC to make sure that it was palatable and wouldn't affect local governments as it related to the preemption piece. Let's see. Yeah, that was the only bill I wanted to update on the energy side. Telecom as well. I think we talked about this last week. We'll have some energy or some interim projects on cybersecurity reporting and some other issues. But for this session, it's starting to quiet down on the energy and telecom side. Questions?
I am not seeing any questions come through. Thank you, Greg.
Yeah, thank you.
And we'll be moving on to housing and economic development issues. Alexandra.
Oh, I am for some reason pulling up on the wrong camera. 1 second while I fix where I'm coming from. Hi, folks. For those of you who have not met, I'm Alexandra Rang. I'm the housing and land use lobbyist. I'm currently covering economic development as well. I will say on the housing side, pretty slim week. A lot of things have either spent the majority of their time awaiting final amendments, final hearings, things like that, or they've just been sitting there kind of awaiting the floor votes. 4035 is up today, kind of in this hour on the floor. For those of you who've been tracking that, it does on the floor in the Senate. It does have to go back to the House for concurrence, which might be a little bit of a problem, but we'll see how we go. For those of you who are either supporting or opposed to 4037, that did get additional amendments yesterday in the Senate Committee on Housing. It's a House bill, which means similar to its friend 4035, it will have to go back for concurrence in the House because those amendments occurred so much later. There is more concern that that will not pass due to that concurrence issue. Concurrence tends to get a little bit dicey as we get down into session. The ones below that we expect to just kind of sail through. I'm going to really focus in on ECDEV bills today because we've kind of, HB 4084 has been on thin ice. It got particularly thin this morning as more articles continue to come out about the kind of data center portion of the bill. We're really starting to hit hard on kind of data centers being a local option. Not all localities have to approve them. If that's not the right choice for your local government, that is, entirely within your power to say, no, that's not something we want in our E-zones. But for other local governments, it is the right choice. It's what their community needs. It's what they can support. So we're really urging people, if you are, reaching out to folks this weekend on bills, to include 4084 on your list, especially when you're talking to House members about why this matters to your communities. If you're interested in talking points, I am happy to send those out to folks. We're really trying to do a big final push probably through kind of 9 a.m. Monday when it's up in front of Capitol construction, especially with those House Democrats, just to ensure that we don't end up with any kind of issues and we can hopefully get this one across the finish line this session. So reach out for talking points. Happy to help if you have additional questions, but 4084 is probably on some very thin ice. So if your jurisdiction's really looking for those ECDEV changes, now's the time. And with that, I'll turn it back to Nicole, or does it go to Michael now?
It will go to Michael. I'll do a quick pause to see if there's any questions. And while I pause, I'll also add Senate Bill 1586 is in a good place in terms of votes on the floor, but getting it to the floor has been challenging. So would encourage additional outreach on that as well. And with no questions in the queue here, I'll go ahead and turn things over to Michael.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for taking time to join our call. So just want to give you a brief update on a handful of bills. So Water Professionals Appreciation Week has passed out of both chambers. We are working with the legislator's office about possibly doing a bill signing. And again, I just want to reemphasize this bill, the purpose of this bill is that so going forward, we can really reemphasize the importance of having the qualified men and women who are wastewater, drinking water operators do these jobs and how important this is to each and every one of your cities. And so we can continue to have that conversation going forward, especially during a short session. It can be challenging to pass a bill. So this was a good bill. It sailed through, and hopefully we'll have that signed soon. I'm going to go out a little order here. So House Bill 4030, this is the RMA amendments. This bill is still in House rules. So for all intents and purposes, it's still, possible until the last gavel goes down at the end of session. But this really has come out of some of the discussion about the impact of fees on the RMA. And we oppose this bill because we don't think it should be done. Any amendments to the RMA should be done in statute, and the cost of recycling, like so many of you have said, in emails to me, does not go away for cities outside of this. So there's a process. We do think on the flip side of the coin that we do need to have some discussions, larger discussions about accountability and how concerns with the RMA are heard if the agency agrees or disagrees with that. So we imagine that there'll be a work group, but we're watching this one, House Bill 4030, but it is in House rules right now. And then last on the list in front of you, 4144, this is the battery producer responsibility. This just passed out of the Joint Ways and Means Committee earlier this week, and it is being second read on the floor, and we imagine that this will pass out of the House. Then last but not least, I wanted to cover the grant matching. As Greg said earlier, you can spend a lot of time sitting in hearing rooms, and you are all the linchpin for making sure that this bill gets across the finish line by submitting a letter to your representative. So this bill would reduce grant matching on a tiered basis for cities population 20,000 or fewer. It used to apply to all infrastructure grant programs, but through negotiations, we got it to seven. It would impact 7 programs. And instead of being voted out, as Nicole talked about at the top, of the policy committee, it is going to House rules. And it's there. We hope that this bill can be worked out without amendments that can be voted out and sent to the House floor. But we need you to write a letter to your state representative, let them know, include House Rules members. I sent an email to many of you earlier, but just send them a letter, and this can help push this bill over the finish line.
Thanks, Michael. And we've got a question here about from a larger city. Is there value in larger cities in providing testimony or support of 1585? And if so, are there talking points from that perspective?
Yeah, that's a great question. So we had heard from leadership that this bill not applying to cities above 20,000. There may be some questions about that. So certainly, if you are a larger city, I mean this bill would benefit 87% of our members. If you are a larger city and want to say to leadership, we support this, you can email the speaker's office. Like you can reach out to me directly. My email is part of this, the presentation. But really the high level is that, the work that is going to happen as a result of these projects that would be impacted, the workforce is going to come from surrounding areas, in sometimes other cities. So there is a benefit to larger cities expressing support for this well, even though there's not a direct impact currently in this bill.
And Michael, I would add, just in terms of the impact for larger cities, it's also important to consider that Senate Bill 1585 does not change any competitive grant requirements. So these are still competitive grants. It just allows cities that are able to compete to actually get through the door and get their project moving. So it is not negatively impacting anyone to allow folks to get through the door. Really appreciate that question. And I'll pause here to see if there's other questions on Michael's portfolio. All right, hearing none, just a reminder of some assignments. We were hoping you'll contact your representatives in support of 1585. We just talked about that bill. I'll leave that there. If you have questions after this meeting or additional come up, raise your hand and we can chat more about it. We also would love for you to submit testimony on the local act on Monday. That testimony before Monday hearing is most impactful, but you'll have until Wednesday at 8 a.m. to submit testimony. And I'm speaking on behalf of other staff at LOC, want to remind you the LOC Spring Conference is open for registration. We encourage you to register there. And having gone through the updates and the assignments, want to turn it over to see if there's any additional questions. You can put them in the QA feature or raise your hand to ask them live. I'm not seeing any hands up or any questions. If you think of them after this meeting, here is your LOC lobby team. We're here to be a resource to you all and to support the work you need to have happen in Salem. Reach out to us anytime. We're always happy to connect. Thanks all for joining.